So I explained three of the ancestors on the boat of Ra in part 1. Namur, who is Osiris, Neithhotep, who is Isis, and is also the wife of Namur, and they together are the parents of Djur, who is Horus. And Horus, or Djur, was one of the first two principal rulers of the first dynasty of Egypt, and the other principal ruler of the first dynasty was Djet, who is Set, and Djet is the Set of the story of Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Set. And I'll explain Set next, but before I do, I have something important to share with you first. The reason that I mentioned Israel and the Temple Mount in part 1 is because I want to point out the fact that most black people know about the Temple Mount in Israel. This is common knowledge among most people in the world. Yet very few people know anything about the most important site, or what should be the most important site to black people, because it's more sacred than the Temple Mount or even the Egyptian ruins that lie beneath it. And this sacred site is the burial place of the ancestors of the boat of Ra. So in 1898, archaeologists discovered the tomb of Osiris, and they called it Tomb O. This tomb is located in Abydos, Egypt, and it is also known as el Kab. And this is a layout of the actual tomb, and inside of Tomb O, they found a statue of Osiris with a kite. The kite represented Isis, who was straddling the loins of Osiris in order to impregnate herself with Horus. And this is the actual statue, but what you'll notice is that there are actually two women, not one, straddling the loins of Osiris. Inside of Tomb O, located in Chamber D, they also found a skull. And according to the ancient Egyptian texts from the cult of Osiris, the skull belonged to Osiris. They also found a staircase that the Egyptians called the staircase to the great god. So in 1898, archaeologists discovered Tomb O, or the tomb of Osiris, with the staircase leading to the great god along with his skull. In ancient times, this site was so holy to the Egyptians that they made laws protecting the site from foreigners or anyone else who encroached upon this site. The ancient Egyptians once a year would migrate to this location and pay homage to the ancestors that are buried in this tomb. They would perform a play, a reenactment of the story of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set. This play was later called by the Greeks the Passion Play. And this later became the Passion Play of Christ, and in the original Egyptian version, it was Osiris who was the central figure of the play. Later, the Greek version has Horus, or Jesus Christ, as the central figure of the story. So according to the Egyptians themselves, Tomb O was the holiest site known to them because it's the burial place of the sacred ancestors, the ones who survived the flood, the ones who ride the boat of Ra. And Tomb O is indeed the burial chamber of Namur, who is Osiris, Neithhotep, who is Isis, and Djur, who is Horus, as well as the brother of Osiris, who is Set. His throne name was also Djet. So 5,000 years ago, after the flood and after Namur, or Osiris, died, the Egyptians set up what's known as the first dynasty of Egypt. And it was Isis, or Neithhotep, that declared that Horus, her son, be given Egypt, and her brother Set be given everything outside of Egypt's borders. So the first two principal rulers after the flood are Djur and Djet, who are Horus and Set. Horus is given Egypt, or Africa, and Asia and Europe, and Set is given the Americas and Canada and the islands. And this is why we find H-block pyramids in Africa and in South America, all dating to the same time after the flood. And this is why the Popol Vuh of the Mayans in South America is telling the same story of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set. And this is why we find the similarities between the civilizations of South America and the civilizations of Africa, because after the flood, during the time of Horus and Set. This is when we see the division of the land. And this division of the land was literal because Africa and the Americas used to be connected. So as you can see on the boat of Ra, we have 8 people. In the front of the boat is the 2 ladies. In the middle is Osiris, surrounded by what is called the 4 sons of Horus. In the back of the boat is Ra. So in order for me to explain a little bit more about Set, I need to explain what is called the 4 sons of Horus. These 4 ancestors in the Abrahamic religious texts are known as the 4 corners or the cardinal points, the 4 angels or the 4 beasts around the throne of God, or the 4 winds. They represent the 4 canopic jars that are found in burial tombs of all of the ancient Egyptians. They are known as the protectors of Osiris, or the 4 souls of Osiris, or they're also known as the 4 souls of Pi, or their more familiar name, the 4 sons of Horus. And I'm not sure why they're called the 4 sons of Horus, because they're not the sons of Horus at all. So Djet or Set is one of these 4 souls. He is called Amseti, and Set is the only one of the 4 souls to be shown with a human head. So something that I find interesting about Set is that you have to keep in mind that a lot of what people know today about the myth of Osiris has come from white scholars and their interpretation of Egypt after decimating and desecrating graves. So you have to take that into consideration. But when we look at the story of Set that's given to us, he kills his brother Osiris, and then we compare that to what the Egyptians left behind, showing us that Set was obviously a righteous soul. He was on the boat of Ra. He was given half of the world to rule after the flood, and he is one of the 4 protectors of the dead, according to the Egyptians. And even in the Abrahamic religions, Set, or Seth, as it is in the Bible, because this is his Greek name, he is considered a biblical patriarch. In Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and even in a religion called Sethianism, he is known as not the one who kills his brother, but the one who was born after his brother dies. And he is considered a replacement for his brother. He also represents the male bloodline that produced Enoch, according to the Abrahamic religions. So as I've said, the 4 sons of Horus, as they're called, aren't actually the 4 sons of Horus. The first one is Set, also known as Amseti or Djet. He is the one shown with the human head, and he's the brother of Osiris and the uncle of Horus. And the one standing behind him is the jackal-headed man known by his Greek name Dumotef. And Dumotef is also known as Anubis. Anubis in his most ancient form is shown with the head of the jackal. Just like Dumotef, and he is known in Egypt and in South America as the protector of Osiris. He is known as the great embalmer of the dead in Egypt and as a guide to the underworld in South America. But before the names Anubis or Dumotef, he was known in ancient times as the jackal-headed god Wepwawet, and he is the son of Set. And here the son of Set is killing Apep and protecting the boat of Ra. And as the son of Set, he is one of the 4 souls, known as the 4 sons of Horus, along with his father Set, and again, neither of them are the sons of Horus. And this is a rare image because it's one of the only images known to exist of the 4 sons of Horus, showing them without their masks. So Amseti or Set, the father of Dumotef, was the only one to consistently be shown without a mask. So Set or Amseti and his son Dumotef are 2 of the 4 so-called sons of Horus. So these are 5,000-year-old hieroglyphs of Wepwawet or Anubis, the son of Set, found in Australia, and they date to the same time of the flood. So far I've explained 5 of the 8 ancestors on the boat of Ra. Namur, who is Osiris, his wife Neithhotep, who is Isis, their son Djur, who is Horus, and Djet, who is Set, and the brother of Namur, and his son Dumotef, who is also in ancient times known as Wepwawet or Anubis. And all of these ancestors are buried in what was in ancient times the most sacred site and is now called Tomb O. So I'll continue explaining the rest of the ancestors in part 3.